Before we get started, I should point out that my mind works in a weird circle. I see connecting points through history and how we got to where we are today, but my scope is still limited. I hope that my limited perspective on this subject matter can help you to better understand it insofar as it is able. I also know I am long-winded. I also know that I have Destiny 2 footage in the background, which is a rated T for teen game. All of this is on purpose, and in my mind, necessary. I want to also make one statement before we get going. YouTube is a platform that has developed and enlaced itself in society, worldwide. This is by no small feat. Once everything is children's content, there is no children's content. Once there is no children's content, then children will still watch what they can find. It's the nature of things and a losing battle on a space called the internet. Anyway, the immortal words of God from Monty Python. Let's get on with it. Anyone remember this guy? No? His name is Jack Thomspon. Jack liked to be in the news. He liked to go against many things, but I knew him as the guy that went against video games for certain content. His list of antagonistics and censorship-driven policy pushed into rap, video games, radio, TV, the list goes on. Heck, even the US military felt a bit of his wrath when he went after them over some recruitment ads. His general want was to enforce and ultimately ban anything he deemed, well, you're all smart enough to think of what kind of awful things exist within video games at their worst, but also just as much as they have their perk points. Things of which Jack completely pushed to the side. Now, I refer to Mr. Thompson as Jack as I simply don't give a jack doodle to refer to this man in any other form. He was disbarred for inane claims in Florida and frankly just wasn't worth much of a squat to begin with. He had very little impact on what was going on within games media, minus being a bit of a laughingstock for a rather long time, and could be said to be the one reason censorship has tuned up in the US as heavily as it has. A factor, maybe, but not the general cause, of course. Also, he loved the Streisand effect. I learned about Grand Theft Auto and other mature-rated games because of him when I was younger. Yep, really got his point across and made it so that I, as a child, never saw this stuff whatsoever. You might be asking what this man has to do with COPPA and the FTC, but for me, a lot of it starts here. COPPA itself is a broad rule with a bunch of layers to uncover, and it isn't just set to video games alone. This needs to be said right off the bat. But what also needs to be stated, and something that Jack failed to realize in his filings as he went along through his early days and through the early aughts, was that the ESRB, or Entertainment Software Rating Board, was put in place in 1994. The FTC has also marked this board as a safe harbor in 2018 for relations to COPPA, and that's something very important to note before we even get into the bulk of today's topic. Well, I'm sure this isn't the first video you're seeing on this topic around YouTube, I'm sure. Whether you clicked on those videos or not is totally up to you, but thanks for checking this one out regardless. Recently, YouTube has fallen into another major PR and legal disaster. Granted, it's been going on for several months and most of us just kind of forgot about it, but short version, it's called the Federal Trade Commission and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. For short, COPPA, or COPPA, I don't know. COPPA gonna get you, that's what it might as well stand for. Anyway, if this is the first time you're hearing about this, then let me give you some kind of summation as quick as I can. I think my opening should give you at least a general sense of where all of this is headed, or at least from my opinion, but let's carry on all the same. Websites and businesses did a lot of questionable things when the internet went live. It was kind of like the Wild West of the next new world. In 1998, the Federal Trade Commission put a stop to a fair majority of these bad habits by introducing the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Again, FTC and COPPA for short. Things such as Mrs. Fields taking down kids' birthdays without parental consent was one thing on the list for birthday coupons and the like. This was targeted to children under the age of 13, and that's also rather important to know for the bulk of COPPA, as the law directly states in line 1, the term child means an individual under the age of 13. Several other companies have been nailed for this or similar to send notifications and offers to children under the age of 13. Now, why is this a big deal? For right now, the scientific and psychology communities largely accept several developmental habits within the brain in different age groups. They are ages 0 to 6, 7 to 22, 23 to 65, and anything after 65. Within the first two groupings, but especially in the first, this is when you are the most open to any kind of learning. In a lot of ways, you just don't know any better. In another way, your mind is more open to accepting anything as truth without a lot of preconditions and without a lot of prior knowledge. I mean, realistically, you have none. From 7 to 22, you're discovering yourself for the most part, and you're still open to a lot that you are told. After all, adults are the ones we should be trusting of, and they tell us everything we should expect for our lives, to be successful or to at least live. Right? I could think of a few of my grade school teachers I would love to tell that phrase to. Ah well. Growing up, I was told that the most heavy learning and basic understanding can be taught until age 13 or 14. For instance, this is why instruments, especially string instruments, are taught at early ages, and to learn the dexterity needed at a young age. These are good ways we accept things easily into our minds and day-to-day at younger ages. This is generally where the 1998 COPPA ruling came from, but the community at large continues to analyze how our technological growth, advertising habits, and learning habits tend to affect us as we grow older. Nothing is set in stone. That's perhaps the largest worry of all of this as well. Give an inch, take a mile. That should be just as understanding for the COPPA ruling from 1998 to its rehash in 2013, and now its continued reevaluation in 2020, most of which has already been put into place or is about ready to be. Personally, I see all of this as being laced together and is extremely important to understanding the law as we go forward. Again, in my opinion. And that's largely what we have to go by with this entire situation. Opinions and best guess judgment on both sides of this fence. The general situation that I'm referring to, now that we're well into this thing, YouTube was fined $170 million US to be paid to the state of New York as well as the FTC. The breakdown was something like $134 million to the FTC and another $36 million to New York, as they were the ones that pushed the filing forward against YouTube. YouTube was found as taking, storing, and utilizing information from those under 13, which is in direct violation of COPPA as a whole. The basic premise, without reading much of COPPA too heavily, is that cookies and other tracking pieces from websites cannot be stored for users under the age of 13. One way that YouTube had meant to be compliant with COPPA was the YouTube Kids app. However, let me read a section off to you that makes this a bit nonsense for YouTube. Direct from support.google.com. To provide an experience free of charge, YouTube Kids is ad-supported with limited advertising. When your child selects a video in the app, your child may see an ad intro followed by a video ad marked with ad before the video you selected. These are paid advertisements, paid ads. We only show paid ads that are approved as family-friendly, and all paid ads undergo a rigorous review process for compliance with our policies. Paid ads won't include any click-throughs to websites or product purchase flows. Videos uploaded by users to YouTube are not paid ads, and therefore they are not marked as an ad, nor are they subject to our advertising policies. This may also include content about or from companies who may have also purchased ads in the app. For example, a search for trains could result in train cartoons, songs, and videos of real trains, as well as a TV commercial for toy trains uploaded by a user or a toy train company, none of which we consider as paid ads, as they are not part of the YouTube Kids advertising program. Likewise, a search for chocolate could show a user-uploaded video on making chocolate fudge, even though we do not allow paid ads for chocolatiers. As I mentioned earlier with the Mrs. Fields comment about taking down a child's birthday to send them a coupon on their birthday for a birthday cake or whatever, YouTube was caught red-handed by their own policy that they had, which targeted even YouTube Kids with, lo and behold, a search term. Just like Google to do so, right? Tracking cookies and so on need to be accepted by the adults, but kids under the age of 13 can have an account managed by their parents using Family Link, also direct from support.google.com. Also, kids can lie, but that doesn't tell us much overall with who's actually watching things. The internet just isn't for kids overall. That's a point in case and should be over with. But we still have plenty to cover. The point above with YouTube Kids is still applicable for why YouTube got caught, but it should be stressed further and farther than what I've seen stressed in other places. And that's where we should probably move next. YouTube is abuzz with information regarding COPPA and what it means for creators. Really, it shouldn't mean a thing for us, but I'll get there in a bit. And I should probably state, to a certain degree, it shouldn't matter to us at all. There is a point that is much too far, and there are bad actors that need to be struck, and struck hard. But there too, who is also organizing and enforcing that policy is the issue, and guidelines are the problem that all of us are facing when COPPA is brought up. As I said before, opinions are what we have to go by for the time being until we start to see the severity, or lack thereof, of which YouTube and the FTC will come down on creators come December 20th, and then again, January 1st of 2020. Chadtronic has gone to a degree that looks like it's the absolute worst possibilities for COPPA. Hogue Law from Minnesota has taken a more centered approach to offer up not-so-legal advice to those online and give his opinion on the matter with his knowledge of law, or at least as far as he can figure. Abdallah Smash 026 has gone the complete opposite at this time to state that nothing is wrong and that YouTube and the FTC are completely fine in what they are doing, for the most part. These are summations of these creators' ideas and portrayals and are not entirely showcasing of their overall views. So somewhere in the middle is most likely truth, or at least I would think so, or hope so. There are also places like The Quartering, It's a Gundam, and many others that go to the far extreme of it's the end as we know it, while Review Tech USA takes a mild approach to it as well. And one video I particularly agree with, I will highlight, comes from Video Game Storytime, entitled Why COPPA and the FTC Are Doomed to Failure. Again, I agree with it to a point, but my feelings do lean, as always, on the cautious side. Security through obscurity only goes so far. Also, Noble of Lost Paws had a rather humorous take again, but one that's actually right? We'll get to that in a bit. I at least wanted to mention other places that I know that have covered this topic in so many words, and for you to take a look into it if you are so inclined past this video. I don't agree with all of their takes, and I do believe there are symptoms of society that they fail to see, but this is also not their fault. In fact, it's no one's fault. For what they see, in some ways, I do not. For what they don't see, I do. This is the value and issue with opinion, and why it's important to gather information from a bunch of sources, especially if you're trying to formulate your own. One thing I've been doing on this subject a bit too much, probably. It is also the issue with the guidelines as set out by the FTC, and YouTube hasn't done a whole bunch to help either. In their most recent statements, they have attempted to calm the populace and offer answers. I will still go back to the base facts of it all in the end, but this is why these recent claims by both YouTube and the FTC seem to be more insidious than they are helpful. Again, just to try to calm the populace. This is all opinion-based, again, however. I think I've said that about 80 times now, right? So, let's talk about some of the pieces involved in COPPA and why it affects channels on YouTube. Finally, about 6 pages into this thing, I promise I'm not trying to waste your time. Let's first inspect what we see when we look at something like my channel's URL, http://www.youtube.com/c/beardgrizzly. What are some parts of this URL that you can discern? Well, for one, it's on the World Wide Web. For 2, it's my channel, as it has my unique identifier after the C and after the host, which is youtube.com. My page, my channel, and my operation are all dependent on this hosted platform of YouTube, the actual operator of every option I have here on the site. Without it, the channel would not exist, I would not have over 28,000 subscribers, and you and I never would have met. YouTube is rightly the one who delivered you here, either by your search history or random chance. YouTube was the one fined for gathering and collecting information on those that utilize the website under the age of 13, and are the ones that also play the ads that you see during ad breaks, before or after videos, or whenever they damn well feel like it, because that's YouTube for you. Personally, I can't get enough of Raid Shadow Legends ads. No, really, please, stop it, for the love of God. Meanwhile, the closest information that YouTube supplies to me is that in the form of age ranges for how my videos are viewed. I have to also view this largely by video, but there are means to see a general overview for the channel, and after a little while you can see a pattern anyway. If you've never seen a YouTube analytics page, this is largely what's tracked. Range of age, place of viewership, subscribers and not subscribers, stuff like that to assist in growth. I do not have information related to your personal search history. I have no idea what books, movies, games, or anything else that you may like, minus some assumptions I may be able to make by the content that I create. Heck, I have no idea what tags I place on videos that make it more searchable. And who the hell actually knows how to use search engine optimization in the current year? No, seriously, help me if you do. Please. Jokes aside, I stress this to show that YouTube is the one that keeps any and all search-related information to themselves. I have none of it, and can build none of it. I am the uploader of content I create, but I am not the operator of how the video is sent to you, or how the video is found in the least. I am not the one that asks for your age, your location, or anything else. I simply upload my content to the website and let YouTube make some ad rev off of my content, while I also make a bit of a cut. A very small bit of a cut. This is why when I see the following statements within the FTC's latest letter, I wonder why in the world I'm even a part of this situation at all. So how does COPPA apply to channel owners who upload their content to YouTube or another third-party platform? COPPA applies in the same way it would if the channel owner had its own website or app. If a channel owner uploads content to a platform like YouTube, the channel might meet the definition of a website or online service covered by COPPA, depending on the nature of the content and the information collected. If the content is directed to children and if the channel owner or someone on its behalf, for example an ad network, collects personal information from viewers of that content, for example, through a persistent identifier that tracks a user to serve interest-based ads, the channel is covered by COPPA. COPPA, I know I'm going back and forth, sorry. I can think of two very far-flung reasons as to why this may apply to me in the future or right now. YouTube channels, if partnered with YouTube, are supplied a tax code for wherever they may work or live in. In the US, this falls under sole proprietorship, which would make me the owner of the ID I am given, of course. This is what I use to file taxes at local and federal levels. If I were to fully extend how this would apply to a business, then I could go with the idea of myself being a channel owner, and it's also why YouTube doesn't want to fully employ its creators. Otherwise, they would have to take absolute and full responsibility for what we do. Legally speaking, that's how they could get around being fined again for what we do. But that's even a loose thread thanks to the stipulation provided by the FTC. If a channel owner uploads content to a platform like YouTube, the channel might meet the definition of a website or online service covered by COPPA depending on the nature of the content and the information collected. As stated before, I receive and gather zero information. I have no persistent data that would apply to knowing what you watch, who you are, or otherwise. And without some of you commenting, I wouldn't know who even watches my videos at all, minus a vague age range supplied by YouTube. And even then, I still don't know your specific age or anything like that. But you know, YouTube's just the one that owns the .com holder for my channel, so there's that. It's also dependent on the nature of the content and information collected. Therefore, the one way this can be read as is it doesn't apply to absolutely anyone other than YouTube in terms of persistent information collected, and my content is just a tool for YouTube to use in gathering that information. This is one perspective, but I think it a strong one from what we've seen over the years. YouTube is solely responsible for its ad practices on content created for kids. Again, this should be video over, but we're still here and we still got plenty to cover. The other part of that statement, the nature and information collected, goes along with the continued vague nature of the FTC as a whole and what content actually applies to COPPA. 1. The subject matter. 2. Visual content. 3. The use of animated characters or child-oriented activities and incentives. 4. The kind of music or other audio content. 5. The age of models. 6. The presence of child celebrities or celebrities who appeal to children. 7. Language or other characteristics of the site. 8. Whether advertising that promotes or appears on the site is directed to children. And 9. Competent and reliable empirical evidence about the age of the audience. This leads to the second point I wanted to bring up about channel owners, and it does make sense to a degree about the sponsorships that we, as creators, would accept and promote. This is also why I have yet to accept one, because I've yet to find any that match my personal style or products that I believe in, and why we all should be doing the same. Like, look, Rich Wallet might be okay. Still iffy on that one. Anyway, joking again, probably shouldn't. Point 8 is the one in reference here, just to make it clear about the idea of advertising and so on. But the point that is still a little bit more gray is number 6. Creators are pretty well given the title of celebrity to some degree or another. This becomes a bit tougher to classify, however, as content creators' level of celebrity is not the same as Hollywood's. The other piece that is unknown is whether the content has to fit all of these points, which is highly unlikely, or some of them, which is much more likely. To the FTC's credit, I do believe they have a set pattern of who they are after at this measure, with Hasbro, Cartoon Network, DreamWorks, and Mattel all being cited in the revised complaint by the FTC, the one that won them the case, by the way. Their YouTube content is in full question. This is also where we can find a bit of doublespeak, however, and it also shows us plenty about what the FTC is looking for, especially when we end up looking at actual content creation channels and not ones hosted by companies. I'm going to highlight paragraph 34 from this complaint and explain why in a bit. 34. YouTube channel Bratayley is a popular channel featuring children engaging in a variety of scenarios with their parents. The channel's content regularly appears on YouTube Kids and is featured on its home canvas. The About section of its YouTube channel webpage states, "Family-friendly content every day? Yep, that's right. Watch these crazy kids as they make every day an adventure." Episodes of the show include Epic Pillow Fight and Annie's Hair is Purple. In one email, defendant's employee lists Bratayley as targeting children ages 8 to 10, based on defendant's age classifier tool. In addition, at least one video appearing on this channel was one of the most popular videos on YouTube Kids during a 90-day period in 2016. The piece that bugs the absolute crap out of me is near the end. In one email, defendant's employee lists Bratayley as targeting children ages 8 to 10 based on defendant's age classifier tool. For me, this reads as no matter if your intended audience is for children or not, if you fall as lower than the intended audience you are targeting, you could still get nailed for your audience shifting to a younger age. This is just how channels can grow, evolve, or change, regardless of your subject matter. This is the only instance within the complaint I was able to find for this point being made, but it still worries me to a large degree as it exists. I should also point out that they list it as defendant's employee, which would be the relationship of Bratayley to YouTube, if I'm interpreting that right. This point could be completely wrong, but I still find it interesting. This is confusing as it would confirm that YouTube does employ certain creators with favoritism or otherwise, along with having official employees they are subject to handling properly. Boy, that took a turn. That is not the only instance of reading that phrase from the complaint, by the by. It's a very interesting complaint. It's only 14 pages long if you guys do want to give it a read. I did find it interesting. This also goes in direct contradiction to another point in this article, which is, under COPPA, there is no one-size-fits-all answers about what makes a site directed to children, but we can offer some guidance. To be clear, your content isn't considered directed to children just because some children may see it. If you're wondering why I feel it's important to talk about any of this, it's thanks to contradictions like these, where the wording is far too vague and could be open to different interpretation altogether. It opens too many doors in a legal sense. Though, I'm not a lawyer, so take what I say with a grain of salt and not as any advice whatsoever. It is, again, opinion. Opinion. Have I said that enough at this point? I think so. Most other channels listed were the ones you would expect being on YouTube Kids' main page for 90 days or more, listed as family-friendly, and so on. A symptom of the virus that was YouTube's policies to knee-jerk and not really fix or implement ways that they could actually fix their systems in a proper manner, or to knee-jerk and never set them to a better position with time. Instead, they adopted a system of family-friendly and only family-friendly, which has now cost them over $170 million US. The jokes write themselves in this particular case. We're already very into this, and I really don't want to let YouTube off the hook whatsoever with the stuff that they covered from the FTC, which, funny as it is, it's the same stuff that we've already been going over. So unfortunately, YouTube doesn't have any additional advice or information for us at all. YouTube is to blame for the steps they took in targeting children, those under 13, with ads that would fit what they are searching for. Even if temporary, this is a major oversight on part of the company, even though I think they knew exactly what they were doing. And I can't help but see it as a means for them to make additional cash flow thanks to this children's content. In case you're curious, these channels supposedly pulled in about $50 million US combined of the ones written in the complaint. How that is split up is unknown information at current, but also doesn't really matter. They are also to blame for any automated system sweeping the site that is attempting to pinpoint what could and could not be viewed as for kids, without further elaboration on why. Basically, they have no idea and are not willing to elaborate or find additional details out, or are that scared for themselves in a legal sense. They're also the ones to blame for the current system of marking videos as for kids and not for kids, when in fact they have two applications for this very reason. YouTube Kids should not have ads enabled on the platform. Period. This causes issues for YouTube's ad revenue, along with ad revenue for these creators, and this is where the gray line also begins to form for these creators. Those that build Legos, models, do playing cards, day in the life of videos, and so on, are at risk for their content being pulled into the demonetized position thanks to these creators who were basing their videos for those under the age of 13 and doing so right in their About sections. Realistically, just completely avoiding the law altogether. Not that Nickelodeon, Disney, Saturday morning cartoons, Cartoon Network, or other stations that broadcast anything on their platform are any different whatsoever. But that comes down to the absolute and last part of all of this, which makes my last point that I just made generally useless as it is. Parents are in charge of their children. End of the day, that's how all of this works out. There is always money to be made from children, and the FTC, YouTube, and other companies know this. Creators follow the same general practices as shown out in the wild from corporations that generally have to follow the same principles. But yet, they have ads that play between breaks for their cartoon shows and other kids' programming. Even if it's related to another program on that network, like having SpongeBob on Nickelodeon and having an advertisement for the next episode of Double Dare or something. I don't know what kids watch anymore, so I'm just making an example here from my childhood. Kind of. Didn't have SpongeBob back then. Anyway, that's still getting them to stay interested in the broadcasting at hand. Parents are, at the end of the day, responsible for what their children watch. Creators are not the ones that are there to babysit for them or here to give them something to do when they either can't give them attention or otherwise don't want to. But there is an addendum to this. Again, this is a symptom of society as I see it, and one that is showing its head more often, and now hitting home for me. In the case of those parents that are single or together and working 3 jobs, I can't and don't expect your kids to do something underneath your nose, to lie about their age and create an account that they can have to view content they probably shouldn't. I can only imagine the hardship of that and needing to take care of yourself just as much as your child in the current year. The past several have been plenty indicative of that, at least from my perspective. Again, this is a symptom of society. One could argue you are very much a victim of it. As much as parents are the ones that need to watch over all of this, however, YouTube still needs to be the one held accountable. By the longest stretch and reach of the law listed, content creators can fit into the mold of pieces that govern COPPA and make the rule necessary to begin with. It is an important law. It is something that should be enforced. It should be looked into, however, and understood how all of creation and content platforms have altered with time. It also should not be a weaponized factor for YouTube, as in the case of Upper Echelon Games, where his Google Stadia review was marked as for kids, in which it was most definitely not. YouTube has zero review policy for this. As soon as someone finds a video and manually reviews it at YouTube as for kids, we have no means to move it out of that setting. That is a major flaw with the system, and especially as a smaller channel, if that ever happens to me, I'm pretty well stuck. And it shows the further incompetence that YouTube operates on with this policy in place. It also shows the lengths they are willing to go to damage creators, as they could damage that of Upper Echelon further than just a demonetized or for kids video. In addition, getting rid of things and censoring them about a new product that you just made, boy, if that doesn't look bad for you, YouTube. Google as well. Let's be honest here, it isn't just YouTube. It also goes to show the knee-jerk reaction that YouTube is having to edgier content, as reported by The Verge and several other news outlets just recently. Susan Wojcicki, or however you pronounce her last name, I really don't care, CEO of YouTube, has gone on record as saying, "We're working to identify advertisers who are interested in edgier content, like a marketer looking to promote an R-rated movie, so we can match them with creators whose content fits their ads," Wojcicki wrote. In its first month, this program resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars in ads on yellow icon videos, referring to an icon that appears to creators when their videos are demonetized. Perhaps, Susan, if you didn't go the fully family-friendly approach as you have, you wouldn't have put this part of Alphabet in the position it's in now. Perhaps if you and Google would start to wake up and realize that the further you go in the direction you are to suppress content and creators is the more you're going to make it harder for you to grow. Children are no longer an audience you can profit from. They never should have been. Now you have to shift the direction. This is absolutely 110% your fault, YouTube. And Susan, if you're the major decision maker for all of this, you should be ashamed of yourself. If you're not, then the people around you need to learn from this trend, this entire instance, and fix it. Quickly. Learn to not be so heavy-handed and start to stick up for your creators more often. It's obvious this is finally going to bite you, and bite you hard. Also, this is the part where Noble from Lost Paws can go, "Hey, they do need me." Anyway. Also, Susan, perhaps don't prop up jack-offs like Jake Paul and other bad actors that constantly decide to take advantage of the goodwill of those that do watch their content. and who constantly promote their merch every video instead of actively making something worthwhile to watch that's either educational, needed, or is much better entertainment than an episode of Jackass. Perhaps don't prop up van channels and subscribe people to them without their consent, putting yourself in another bad predicament that makes you look like you're trying to prop up certain people and have certain channels that you care for more than others. Perhaps don't censor and shut down those you don't agree with. Perhaps don't cater to a type of audience. And remember that the U in YouTube stands for the creator of all kinds. Their outlooks can be open to any interpretation. You choose to prop up certain creators. You chose to let this happen. And I have no sympathy. But yes, continue to get rid of the creepy people that are out there and continue to look over bad behavior as it stands. You should have been doing that from the get-go anyway. For us as the viewers, and just a message to all of you realistically, we should use that report button more often in certain cases and know when something goes too far. I could think of something hanging in a forest as being something that should have been acted on and is the last straw for you to finally get off your ass and do something proper, YouTube. But again, you didn't. In fact, you stood up for it and said they did nothing wrong. What a joke. And Google, if you continue on with your current circumstances as they are and take no action, well, that's your house. You can leave it as cluttered as you want to, I suppose, but you sure look like idiots for it. And in this situation, along with several of your current equipment releases lately, that makes you look as out of touch as we all expected you to be. It's almost too easy to see it now. And really, it shouldn't be if you really want to make sure your business practices stay in good place. Lastly, to the FTC, you're not off the hook. The vague nature that you have in place with COPPA still stands to be the overall issue that you have yet to fully explain. You state that the ESRB is a safe harbor organization, but you're unclear about what games can be covered. Is it entirely the nature of the content creator itself? Or is it the game? Is it how the creator presents the content it creates, or entirely based on the subject matter at hand? Is it a mix of all of these things? Does it matter what the target audience even is, as you've made it clear in your complaint that it does not? All of these questions, even just relating to video games, and not that of Lego, comics, movies, or other enthusiast channels, could potentially be nailed by what you have in place. And as far as gaming goes, Minecraft, Mario, Pokemon, Crash Bandicoot, all of these can be seen as for kids. This is why it's difficult to take you at your word as it stands right now. I do appreciate the bit of verbiage you've given us so far, but it needs to go further. As public servants, I hold you accountable to that. Until we have more concrete measures in place, it will continue to read as vague and open to interpretation, and that's the worrying part of any subjective piece of law. This is why I think it's great to have, and we should enforce it. But let's get something more in further revision before we go forward with it. You need to have further evidence and pieces that show exactly what content you are looking for. Your targets were rather clear in the complaint filed against YouTube. How will you shift as you go after 23 million channels? How many of them will start to blur together and suddenly you've got a third party you're working with that hits a channel that doesn't really deserve it? How many of them will get a fair shake? Will there be time to shut things down if we are hit with the possible $42,000 fines you are possibly subjecting content creators to for not, in any way, taking the information that YouTube collects and keeps and using it to build their own systems and channels for what they use on whatever Google wants? What kind of avenues are there for repeals and reports to try to get things rectified and worked out? How can we better work with you to understand what we can do on a platform that has also done nothing for us to clearly understand this vague law or anything else that has been going forward? And if you say simply to get a lawyer, you know how unrealistic that is. And boy, oh boy, if that doesn't set in societal symptoms and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Anyway, this is where your obvious disconnect is with those that you serve. And I have little care left for your policy until you actually start to explain yourself. Until then, You look like Jack Thomspon, who was out for some cash in office, and doing it all for the kids. You have a legacy you're following, and it isn't a good one. I just wonder how long until the next generation finds something about Red Dead Redemption 2 at 5 years old, and everything comes full circle the moment this enforcement becomes more reality, and suddenly parents are on the track of video games are too violent, and suddenly we have another Jack Thomspon that goes into office. Yeah, because history doesn't repeat itself whatsoever. In the same, I am wondering just how much you, the FTC, can truly and objectively enforce COPPA on YouTube. If you have help with doing so and actively want to look over the hundreds of hours per second uploaded to YouTube, then hey, more power to you. That's a lot of man hours. To potentially hire enough people to look over that many channels, that much content, that would require a lot of capital. Not to say a lot of possible taxpayer dollars besides. Wonder how many people you're going to make mad with that one. It's also something that creators have been telling YouTube to do for years, and once again is biting YouTube in the rear. No one argues this point at all. I worry that if you do take up this crusade, that you will hit a lot of targets that shouldn't be hit, and potentially ruin lives in the process because of the subjective and vague takes herein. Animation channels, gaming channels, how-to channels. The list could go on, and for the kind of content you find being covered in COPPA. When your list of activities that aren't covered in COPPA are as slim as employment conversation, finance conversation, politics, home ownership, home improvement, or travel, you bet I have issue with your legal process and ability to understand those you serve. You are public servants. You receive taxpayer dollars. If this is your intent, then you have a lot to prove to the people, and not just the uninformed soccer mom and deadbeat dad. Also, if somebody from YouTube has sold you on creators being able to take in information that YouTube collects, I'm sorry you were fooled, but we're not the ones that can or should get nailed, period. Talk with us, instead of just receiving emails from our so-called employer. You've yet to talk to the people. That's a failing that no amount of public comment will fix. To those outside of the States, you are also not safe. But you're more likely to at least just have your content marked as for kids, more than having fines actually hit you. COPPA has been criticized as being widely ineffective over the years, so we'll see just how they can enforce it outside of the US again, since I don't think that's going to go well. To all of my fellow creators, no matter when or where you may be. Wait a second, this isn't my outro yet. Be ready, be prepared, and be set for whatever may come. It may be a gentle breeze and only target the obvious, or as obvious as the complaint listed for us. It may be worse, because we're relying on both the FTC to be fair in their judgment, but also YouTube's machine learning and manual review to be accurate. And neither of those from YouTube have proven to be accurate at all, and the FTC has shown their hand more times than one as being out for some spare cash from those they deem as high crime offenders. Boy, imagine making a video on YouTube and being a high criminal. I've always lived by the old proverb, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. It's made me a bit more paranoid than it ought to be, most likely, but it has saved me from plenty of circumstances. Keep your cool, however, and try not to overstress, though I'm one to talk. We can only wait and see per this point so long as you've made the necessary preparations, and be honest with yourselves about those preparations. Also, if you really want to make YouTube mad, just ask them over on Twitter, since that seems to be about the only place you can actually reach them, about mixed audience exception for YouTube, and how they're not taking advantage of that at all. Seriously, YouTube isn't going to bat for you on this. If you think they are, you're a bit silly. Don't expect things to be perfect and great, no matter how far-flung your thinking may be that this is going to blow over without a problem. There's too much gray space here to see it go without a hitch. Ask questions for clarity. Get them to help you with this. It's their wallet as much as yours. Anyway, this has gone on a lot longer than I expected. Obviously, I had a lot to say. By the end of it, do I think anything will change for myself, for this channel? Well, it remains to be seen, but I'm leaning towards it not hitting me initially. It could also change and alter down the road, especially if the FTC regards and tries to change up COPPA again. If the ESRB is ever pulled as a safe harbor organization, especially with some of the stuff going on with loot boxes and so on within the organization, then gaming content really will be in trouble. For now, I can only wait and see. And get back to my general content creation path besides, because I've been on this path a little bit too long, haven't I? To those that are just viewing this video of mine, this is not my usual content at all, so if you're expecting more like this, I don't expect so in the future. But some topics are bigger than any channel's style and need to be talked about in any way possible. I cover Destiny lore and other topics within the game itself, occasionally some other games as well. If you're interested in my deep dive approach, as you just listened to here, then you have a general idea for the content I already make, at least for the most part. I won't say everything is always deep dive as this can be, but at least it gets close. To those that have been here for a while or even just found me recently, thanks for sticking with me on this one, and I hope I've given you more information on what could potentially hit all of the creators that exist on this platform. If you'd like to give a public comment to the FTC on your feelings, thoughts, and give more of a general synopsis on your feelings towards everything, I will leave a link below for you in the description, as well as the first comment of this video. I do ask, sincerely, that you be civil and add to the conversation. Don't call them namby-pambies and so on. Again, thanks for giving this a listen, and I hope it helped you understand where many are coming from. Broad terms can be turned and used against anyone in particular ways. It's why definites need to be placed in law. This is how far do we want to be a bunch of jerks today territory. One wrong move by an angsty auditor and bam! You just got hit with a fine that could ruin your day, week, year, life. But before I continue, no matter when or where you are, I'll see you next space time. Take care.